Cuban and I are just arguing about who's going to have the last say. Like, do you want to have the
No,
last say? Sure.
you can have another say, but I want to ask.
You asked me if I had anything, and you just literally just over like talk to me. It's fine.
I'm Gerardo Pollard.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault. Vet Vaulters, welcome to another episode. It's a very special episode. We are recording this episode with Gerardo in hospital with Alex because they just had their new baby. Congratulations, Gerardo.
Thanks, Hubert. We are super excited for the safe arrival of our little Lorelei. She's really feisty, and they have to wrap her up at like a little kebab because she flails around the place and screams all day.
How's that for commitment? Still recording a podcast a day after having your, well, you didn't have the baby, but you played some role in.
Played some role. That's right. We're juggling busy Easter, public holidays, and baby time. So we'll get there. Right, thanks, man. Our guest for today is Dr. Ivan Zakharenkov, or Dr. Ivan Zak, as he's better known. Ivan is a veterinarian and an entrepreneur committed to creating products that empower healthcare teams to live their passion. If you haven't heard of Ivan, then there's a fair chance that you've heard of or possibly used his brainchild on a daily basis in your hospital. Ivan was the founder of the now ubiquitous veterinary software, Smartflow. It was Ivan's personal journey from practicing veterinary medicine for 12 years that led to the development of Smartflow and eventually to his current mission. Early in his career, Ivan experienced severe burnout, and it was that experience that led him to explore the psychological triggers of burnout and business methodologies that veterinary organizations can apply to work against burnout. Ivan obtained an MBA degree in international healthcare management and wrote a dissertation on implementation of lean thinking to improve employee experience. Today, Ivan's leading Veterinary Integration Solutions, a technology company helping veterinary groups implement an operating framework for sustainable integration of practices with a special focus on burnout prevention.
Our conversation covers some of the highlights of the findings of the burnout study and his thinking about solutions to burnout. What I love about Ivan's thinking that has flowed from the study is that the focus is not on how we as individuals can get better at preventing burnout. Instead, it focuses on the causes of burnout at a management and leadership level and on practical solutions. Ivan talks openly about his experience with burnout and how to identify it. We discuss the 6 triggers of burnout and strategies to mitigate it. And he gives us an insight perspective on how corporate veterinary practice works that might surprise you. And we talk about money and its role in job satisfaction and burnout. If you are a leader in your team, then this is a must listen. And remember, whether you know it or not, you are a leader in your team. I want to say that I can guarantee that this conversation will give you some fresh insights into the inner workings of our profession and provide you with ideas on how it could and should work. Please enjoy Dr. Ivan Zak. Ivan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
And I would just like to extend a really warm welcome to one of my good friends from many years back from the start of, I'm sure you guys would have heard of this app. It's called like Smart Sheet or Smart something. Just kidding. It's called Smartflow. This guy,
Smart Guy. It's called Smart Guy after me.
Smart Guy. This smart guy made Smartflow. Yeah.
So I have a story about this, John. I said to Ivan when we started organizing the podcast, when I bought my first iPad, I sat at work one night on night shift. This was years ago. I don't know when Smartflow started. And I was just going through the app store going, wow, what cool apps are out there. And I found this little thing called Smartflow. It was very, very basic. It was just a hospital cage card, but I loved it. I was like, this thing's amazing. And played with it a bit and used it. And then a few years later, it's the thing. Oh, and I said to Ivan, the best thing is I got stuck on something and I emailed Smartflow support, and this dude called Ivan emailed back and said,
well, I was support for the first like 2.5 years. It was just me. It was sales support and everything else. The funny thing is that when we went on a app store, just initially when we made the app, there was, I think, 5 or 12, something like you could literally count them, apps in veterinary domain. So that's why it was so easy.
I know, that's how I found you. Exactly.
Well, what every vet does when they buy an iPad, they go, "Oh, what's there for veterinary domain?" You know.
I remember you talking about your journey into that, mate. You're an emergency veterinarian, right? And what you shared to me, whether this is true or not, I'm sure it's true though. But like where you learned all your business, where you learned all your stuff regarding marketing and all your other stuff about trying to create a problem, create a solution to everyone's problem was like your drives back and forth to practice. Like you used to listen to business books and tapes and CDs, tapes back then because you're that old, but maybe CDs, I don't know. I don't know. Was
Yeah,
that true?
tapes. Didn't have tapes, but no, but it was funny. I remember because I was the vet, right, in the business. So there's two of us. There was Pavel, who was a techie, so he was writing the code, and then I had no idea what am I supposed to do. I came up with the idea, and the end of it was, for me, like, go do it for the techie guy.
Yeah.
But then it turns out you have to sell it, you have to market it, you have to all of that stuff that I had no idea about. So then at some point I was frustrated because I was making money. And then my buddy Pavel, he had to move back in with his mom because we did not have money. So I was making money as a vet. And then he was writing the code. And then at some point I was burning out again. I burned out a couple of times throughout my career. And I said, so why am I supposed to do marketing? I have no idea how to do that. So he said, well, how do you think people learn about things? And I said, I don't know, read a book. He said, yeah, go read a book. And I was like, you bastard. So anyways, that's what I ended up doing. And the story is, yes, I took the job like 2.5 hours away from where I lived. And then it gave me 5 hours a day of dedicated time to like start learning this stuff. And then, yeah, and then it kind of evolved 5 years later into, I did do an MBA finally instead of just the tapes in the car. So
is that why you're a big fan of podcasts? Wait, did you discover podcasts back then? Because I find that an immense resource. On my drive, every conversation I have about anything starts with, I heard this on some podcast somewhere.
Yeah, no, I actually like I decided that this is such a great way to learn or listening. So I ended up, I think it was 8 years ago now, I ended up just refusing to watch any movies or like any TV. Like I haven't seen a movie in 8 years or listen to the music. And I completely replaced that with Audible books. So on Audible, the Amazon thing, podcast was a little bit later. And then there were some blogs that no, it was actually a podcast. Yeah, there was Steve Blank from the Lean Startup and all that stuff. So he had a podcast. Yeah, so podcast is the thing.
So let's skip ahead a bit. I want to come back. You already mentioned the word burnout, and I want to dig into that. But I just want to try and figure out, what are you doing now? So I know you around Smartflow. I know that's the big success story, but you're no longer associated with that. And online, you're on Veterinary Integration Solutions. And I'm trying to get my head around what exactly that is. What are you doing at the moment, or what are you working towards?
Yeah, so we were kind of pivoting a lot, and at the beginning when I was trying to explain what it is, it didn't work. It's like with any startup. If you're doing something straightforward, Smartflow was easy. It's like we're replacing cage card with with the iPad thing. Yeah. That was easy. But then when we evolved, we were trying to explain this a workflow operating system or so anyway. So when Smartflow was sold to IDEX, I joined them. I ran their software division for 9 months, and then I ran away from them because I can't deal with corporate. And then I came out of that and I was thinking, okay, well, what can I do next? And it was kind of the accumulation of different areas of veterinary domain that I encountered. So one was, vet at the vet level, then multiple practices across the world. This is how I met Gerardo and went to Australia 3 times. I think I was there. And learning about all kinds of workflows in the clinics. But then it was interesting at the sort of last couple of years of Smartflow, the corporates or the groups started to pay attention to this. And then when you start talking to groups, it's a completely different conversation. So you have, you're selling to a vet, and I could sell Smartflow in one conversation to a vet because they get it. And then you go to corporate and they have no idea. And then it took me a while, and actually maybe while I was at IDEX, is that usually groups have no idea what is required for operations, nor do they care. Because for the most part, it's the sort of short cycle invested money by private equity. Mm-hmm. And then they really need to get a return on investment within 3 to 5 years. So therefore they need to buy and sell very quickly. That's
they
it.
Apply pressure.
Yep.
So I heard this the other day, and that was news to me, and I think a lot of people don't get it. So for a lot of those kind of corporates, the goal is buy and sell. It's buy, accumulate, and sell in bulk almost. Is that the business strategy? It's not so much let's turn this into a thriving, functioning long-term business.
They might say that, but the reality is there's different sort of cycles of consolidation of every industry. And then in veterinary right now, it's different in different parts of the world, which is very interesting because you can see in Europe, like in the UK and Netherlands, it's 60% plus consolidated. I don't know what it is in Australia. I don't know if you guys know the stats. What's the percentage?
No, not as much as that, but you got some pretty big corporates now in Australia now.
Yeah.
But
well, NVA, the JAB there too, right? Because that was a part of the deal.
But I still think the vast majority is independents. I would probably think like 60-40-ish.
Okay. And then in North America, it's about 20%. So that makes it very interesting, sort of isolated experiments in different parts of the world and see what is the agenda of these corporates. So to answer your question, the value creation plan for Consolidator, there's two parts. One is arbitrage, which is basically buying a bunch of hospitals, then resell them on different multiple EBITDA. In North America, the clinics are traded right now around 10 EBITDA, maybe. Even 5-6 years ago was 6, maybe 7. Now it's 10, 11. But then if you merge 10, 20, maybe 50 practices, then you can resell it at 20, 22 EBITDA, like Compassion First and big corporates just recently were acquired. So on its own, if you can bunch the clinics together and then sort of glue them and duct tape them, then in like 3 to 5 years, when the money cycle elapses on the private equity, and this is why private equity invests into it, because it's a short cycle, as many as you can go land grab and resell. Now, when they go to get the money, they give the second part of thesis as well, which is a margin expansion. So 2 parts: arbitrage, buy and sell clinics, and the second one is increase EBITDA. Because if you'll multiply EBITDA, if it's the same 3 years later, then it's one number. But if you also expand the EBITDA by cutting the costs and increasing the top line, then your multiple and the EBITDA that is inside of that multiple is bigger. So that's more lucrative. The challenge is that most people that run consolidation, they are from finance world. They don't know how to run the practices, and there's no window to really improve the practices. So they kind of say, we're going to make life amazing, and then they buy a bunch and they go, this is too hard, and they just resell them.
What white window being the amount of time they're willing to invest in building culture, implementing processes and whatever it may be to try to improve the teams and the quality. Is that what you're saying with white window, like the time to build as opposed to just the time to flip? What do you mean by white window?
So 3 to 5 years, that's the private equity agenda. So when you're investing money, they have to make a return on investment of the lenders, of their investors, within the window of 3 to 5 years. And it has to be within those 5 years. So they really have to push that. And then, business analysts looking around, looking for opportunities to invest. And then veterinary medicine, my favorite new quote, is immune to COVID, because it went down in April of last year. I don't know how it was in Australia, and then it's been up since. Yeah, exactly. So it's a very, very hot area to invest money. And then, so if you have a CEO that, I'm usually joking that if you've been a janitor in the veterinary hospital and you come in and say, I want to consolidate hospitals because I worked in it, they'll give you the money, because all you need to do is really buy the clinics. And then they also say, we're going to improve these clinics. But then if you fail at that, the backup plan is just arbitrage and resell. So there's a big safety there. So this is a long answer to what we do. We really took a task upon ourselves to create a methodology to acquire, integrate, and improve hospitals. And we're writing the blueprint as well as creating software that will help to create the entire process. But this is all with the purpose of preserving the experience that veterinarians and the nurses are going through, because there's a lot of burnout triggers that happen during this acquisition process. So that's kind of, I tied the two together. I wrote the dissertation at the end of my MBA last year. It was about applying lean methodologies to combat the burnout, but we added much more since then.
So this brings us back to the burnout study, and I think what a lot of people want to hear about. And I don't want to rehash stuff that you've already said before. There's a great podcast on the Veterinary Viewfinder. Shout out to those guys, nice podcast. And they dug quite a bit into the findings of this study. So I don't just want to go over the same old ground, but I want to make it a bit more personal, because you've said that you've experienced burnout several times. Let's go back to your early career. So you were an emergency vet and a locum. Is that correct? That's how you started your life as a vet?
This is how I started my burnout as a vet. So first I wanted to be an ER vet, and that was my passion. Well, first I actually wanted to be a radiologist, but I'm not smart enough for that. And then the ER was my passion, and I was doing that. But as ER vet, you can, if you're not doing what Gerardo does in 50 hospitals simultaneously, then you work sort of, we were 4 on, 6 off. So it's like a 10-day cycle.
Okay. Yeah.
Which gives you enough time for lifestyle, for all this stuff. You make decent money so you can actually do things with yourself. And that was great. But what I ended up doing, I'm like, I have 6 days off, so I can do some locums or relief work. And I ended up doing 4 shifts in ER and then 6 more in relief work, which is not a good recipe at all.
So what did it look like? I suppose what I want to get to is what defines burnout versus just... I think, do some people wonder, is vet really for me? Should I be doing it? I don't enjoy it. How do you know whether it's that or whether it's genuine burnout? Knowing what you know now, looking back at yourself back in those days, what were the characteristics about young Ivan that you know now? Yeah, that little dude was burnt out.
So it's really, it was kind of an overlap of several events, but I think that the sort of short version is you stop to care. Like I distinctly remember when the manager, I was so fed up with everything. I'm writing these stupid notes. Smartflow was part of the answers to it, because I was like typing the records at night, and then you're staying, 5 hours after the shift. And then you totally feel unappreciated because it's not the veterinary medicine. You're just typing. And then nobody reads that stuff, maybe sometimes they do, and that ends up in court. And then, it's just like such a pressure. And then you feel like it's a useless task and you become cynical. You push through all of these euthanasias. Christmas is the worst day a year. And then whenever people, I think my record was like 12 euthanasias on Christmas Day. Yeah. And then at some point I started I try to keep a tally of how many animals I've killed. I had license to kill live creatures, and I counted on a year 7. I think I was up to 2,800, just an average across, all the shifts that I've done. But you become cynical too, because you can't cry over every pet. And then some of these things, you become callous and all of that stuff. And I remember the manager talking to me, and she was trying to approach it from an HR perspective. And she's like, well, it's almost like, Ivan, don't care. Of course you do. And I turned back and I said, no, I don't. And I remember that today, it was just and then I was like, whoa, I actually do not care. I want to get out of here as soon as I can, and it doesn't go away. And that's a big difference between the compassion fatigue and burnout. Compassion fatigue is you become that callous and kind of less empathetic, I would say, but then you go home and you forget about that stuff. Burnout doesn't leave you. You go home with it, and it doesn't matter how many vacations you take, you just hate what you do. And that's sort of, it's a pretty dark place to be. And I remember I flipped at someone on the plane. It was a person sitting next to me, and somehow it led to the fact that I'm a vet. And then she was like, oh my God, I always wanted to be a vet since I was 6. It's like every person's story, right? It's like another person that wants to be a vet. And then she's like, how is it? Is it lovely to be a vet? And I was like, you know what? No. And I just poured it in here. I was just like, look, everybody who sees you hates you. They were sitting at home having a beer, watching TV. Their dog starts puking. They're like, no, I need to see a vet now. It's a lot of money. Then they come in. Then you tell them what they've done because they fed pizza to their dog and is having pancreatitis. But then they hate you because it's, $2,500 to admit the pet to the hospital. Then they tell you it's all about money. You don't like animals. And then, so it's just, and I totally just poured it at this lady. She was like, oh my God, this guy's a psycho. But yeah, when you get to that point, it's no fun. You don't want to do that.
There's a lot of vets at that point. I've certainly been there, and
Yeah.
You go on the social media vet sites, and that's a very pervasive feeling. And again, that's what your research proved. I think part of your research was to show, do we think we burnt out, or are we genuinely burnt out? And you categorically show, yes, there's a high rate of burnout in vet.
Yeah, yeah, and because well, it was a part of dissertation. I wanted first to prove that there's, the industry is burned out, and then if yes, then what do we do about it, right? That was sort of the thesis. Because when someone commits suicide, it's bad and it's loud and things like that happen. But I thought it was like a shark attack, yeah, it's big news, but not actually. It doesn't actually happen that often. And then no, vets are burned out. So the survey proven that. So.
Just a quick interruption to remind you about our clinical series of podcasts. If you're struggling to find time to stay up to date with what's new, what's best for your patients, and you want tips and tools to make you a better clinician, then you should check out our exclusive medicine, surgery, and emergency and critical care podcasts at vvn.supercast.tech, where we pick the brains of world-class specialists in short, engaging, and highly practical episodes that are designed to be consumed on the go. That's VVN for Vet Vault Network.supercast.tech. Now, back to Ivan.
I just had a conversation with our vet manager about vets and burnout. And one of the things that I take on as a responsibility as a hospital director is not creating pathways as early as possible and support systems as early as possible to try to facilitate new grads into emergency and set them up for success, as opposed to like come as an emergency intern and we'll spit you out the other end as a broken veterinarian with gray hairs and you look like
or no hairs.
Or no hairs, gray hairs, no hairs like Ivan, or you look like you're around 30 years older like Hubert, right? So
I'm actually 60, man. I just look really good.
These dude, you look really good. You look really good. Oh.
So Ivan, knowing what you know now, and I appreciate that the research was not necessarily to provide all the answers. You're not now the guru or the oracle. Ask Ivan. You should have a little help column. Ask Ivan how to solve my burnout. But if you could go back to young Ivan again and tell him how to do things differently to prevent that burnout, is there anything that you could have done differently?
So this is the whole point of VIS, and I like where Gerardo went with this. Is basically, I don't think it's on the veterinarians. I mean, we are who we are, and then this is a new generation now. This new generation of vets and just humans. They're not going to keep their job for lifelong careers like lawyers, doctors, vets. It's like people change fields very fast. I think it's on us as an industry to make changes. And this is why I talk about, very classic, it's like late 70s, I think, Maslach defined 6 triggers of burnout. And if you can work against those as the organization, whether you're, single hospital, several hospitals, or the consolidators, then I think we have a good chance of extending the experience and preserving the experience of veterinarians. And I can go over those at this good time now. So 6, and I can dive into those from the angle of consolidation and why I think that consolidation is sort of having the tools to deal with it. But also you can apply it at the level of 6 hospitals, 1 hospital. But 6 triggers are, so lack of control. So if people don't feel autonomy at work, that's one of the drivers. And most people think that it's a lot of work, which it's one of them, but there's 6 triggers. So lack of control at what you do, value conflict. If your personal values don't align with the values of the organization, they're not necessarily wrong. They're just different. So when you hire people into your organization, they need to align with what you believe in, and you need to explain them to people. Then insufficient reward. So if people underpaid or taken for granted. So back to my feeling of, nobody appreciates me writing records. That's one of those. You could be paid well, but then feel taken for granted, really. A work overload. So if you work too much, so don't do emergency shifts and then relief work 6 days after that and then go back. And then unfairness. So if in the organization there's a feeling of favoritism and there's no sort of equal rights to everybody, and breakdown of the community. So if there's no feedback system, So if you don't have a strategy or a framework, and you don't deliberately teach people how to give feedback, and you don't have one-on-ones regularly every 90 days, and you just don't give that opportunity, and then no conflict resolution strategies. So that's the 6.
Okay. The 6 horsemen of the apocalypse.
That was 7.
Exactly.
I wrote down 7, man. I got control, value conflict, underpaid, work overload, unfairness, breakdown, and then you said the last one, which was?
So breakdown of the community has kind of 2 components that they classically describe. One is lack of feedback loop, and the second one in that category is the no conflict resolution. So I think that any management, and the reason why we go into consolidation is because we could, I could become a big burnout guru and go out and give lectures and podcasts on this thing, but it's going to influence one hospital at a time. I think that we have a better chance as an industry, and this is the lucky moment. We have consolidation. There's now organizations that have 30, 50, 100, 1,000 hospitals. So now you can reach, because I researched this in the last 2 years in the human hospitals, and they, I researched lean. We apply way more than lean, but the way they could apply lean is because one organization in Boston General Hospital, there's thousands of people working there, and it's a big hierarchical structure. So you can deploy one methodology onto organization. With vet hospitals, there's small brick and mortar. If you're big, you're up to maybe 100 people, but it's 20 people. So if you go one at a time, it's almost like selling Smartflow to one hospital at a time. So I think that having now consolidation, they have the instruments to influence. And for the most part, some people say, well, do they care? Because they want to just flip the hospitals. And this is where the moment in time is very important right now. Because the biggest problem that consolidators have, they acquire a hospital with, 2 producers that push EBITDA of 18%. And then you can accelerate that if you implement, certain top line, bottom line, strategies, you improve efficiency, vendor management, marketing. And then these 2 producers will push EBITDA from 18, maybe to 22, maybe to 25%. But if along the acquisition process, one of them goes, screw it, I don't want to work here anymore, you lose everything. You lose that producer, not the percentage that they produce. So right now, consolidators starting to pay very close attention. How do we retain the workforce? Because globally, there's more pets than vets that can supply. So there's demand is higher than supply. So now consolidators are more looking into how do we preserve this experience? So the sort of unit that produces value for our investors is actually happy working and producing value. So I think that now, if they will work against these triggers, if they preserve the experience, then they will therefore execute on their value creation plan. And then the vets are happy and the consolidators are happy. So I think this is the happy formula.
You said lean a few times, right? Was it something that's derived from Toyota or something a while back or something? Like, how would you explain the lean methodology?
So lean comes from, you're right, it comes from Toyota, from many manufacturers. So to apply lean in veterinary medicine, you make a drive-through window where you push the dog into the first window and then it goes, I'm just kidding. So
I thought that was real. And they go through a deep fryer. They go through a deep fryer.
It's either for, no, that's a cremation services. If its treatment was not successful.
Okay.
Hope only the vets are listening to this because they would get a joke. But yes, you're right. So it comes from Toyota, and there's a real cool guy that I met. He's like the father of lean in healthcare. His name is John Toussaint, and this is the guy who inspired me actually to create VIS as well as the dissertation. So they created an organization called Catalysis. They're in Appleton, Wisconsin, small town. I've been there. Got the bed bugs in the hotel, but. True story, was horrible. I've never had bed bugs, and it was like a nightmare for a week. Explain that to your wife when you come back home. So anyway, so he created an organization called Catalysis. So he was an internal medicine specialist, and then he was a CEO of Wisconsin Medical Organization. and he wanted to change something. He wanted to implement efficiencies and then unite people behind something new. So he took lean from different industries and wanted to apply it to medicine. It kind of worked for the first year or two, and then it broke down. People kind of followed the process, and then they felt, they didn't follow. So he was questioning himself, and he said, why such a great system that works in manufacturing doesn't work in healthcare? And then he changed lean a little bit, and he created 6 principles of lean, which a couple of them are taken from lean manufacture, but the most important ones were, well, starting with the purpose. That's very important. So one of the principles is unity around the purpose. If you create the process, that's great. You can have any process you want in any organization, but if people don't join you because of the reason why you're doing this, so unity around the purpose, it was one of those principles, and respect for people that do the work. Because a lot of people think about lean as like, okay, eliminating waste and, eliminating people, firing people. It's not about that. The most important thing in lean for healthcare is unity around the purpose. It is a continuous improvement. It's flexible regimen. It's not rigid, but the most important, respect for people. So I've been in San Francisco General Hospital. So we visited how the executive team runs lean there. And everything they do is transparent. Everything they do is visual. Everybody can walk up to CEO's whiteboard and say what they're doing today. They visit the hospital. They go around and they check with people once a week, which is called Gemba. They're present where the work is actually happening. So it's an entire methodology, and there's, it's great, but we kind of added more to it. We added traction. Traction. You guys, yeah. I don't know if you still use that. Yeah.
No, we are heavily embedded in traction. It's actually the thing that's actually made us successful, to be honest. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So traction is a huge part of what we actually do. So we mixed lean, traction. That I also became over the last year certified in SAFe. So SAFe is a completely different field. It's in technology. So SAFe is scaled agile framework. And I've been just amazed with it. Basically, Amazon, AT&T went through the transformation using SAFe. And it was initially focused on the tech industry, just like lean was focused on manufacture. But I looked at it, and it's a sort of a 3-4 layer organizational structure, from team to program level to portfolio. So we mimicked that onto consolidation and said, okay, how can we run better quarterly planning? How do we have interdependencies between the initiatives in the organization, and how the metrics cascade up and down? Mm-hmm. So we mixed 3-4 methodologies together, and then we kind of put them against the burnout triggers, and that's the VIS methodology that we arrived to. And now we're having customers, and there's consolidators that are embracing it. So,
wow, that's awesome.
I love that. Go. You go.
You go, Hubert. Yeah, Hubert always overspeaks me, mate. That's how I feel. I am the quiet co-host here.
You're the humble one, right?
Just I don't invite you to stuff and then forget to actually invite me. Never mind.
Hubert has a real sore spot at the moment, mate.
I was going to say...
he's got bed bugs somewhere.
I love that on so many levels, but I just want to make sure I understand it. So you are saying this burnout, it's not necessarily the vet's fault. We can train vets in resilience and personal growth and all that as much as we want, but if the work environment doesn't lend itself to a better work environment, it's not going to work, which I really like. I was part of a meeting about exactly these same topics recently, and everybody had to come with what they think the main pain points are. And I said, I feel sometimes like we are, even at university level, there's a lot of talk about, making the vets better equipped to face the work environment. And I had this vision of, like, back in the First World War, we had the trenches, and you could train those soldiers as well as you want, but you send them over the edge and they run into the machine gun fire, they're just going to get mown down. It doesn't matter how well trained they are. And I feel like that sometimes. So you're saying, let's change the businesses to be a better place to work in, and the way to achieve that is by consolidation. And is that because... And I was a business owner for about 7 years, and I think I get it, because you there's all these things you need to do. As a small solo business owner, I'm not stupid. I know what I'd love to do for the team, and I need to get better as a leader, but there's only so much you can do, and only so much money you have as a single individual business owner. So are you guys working towards saying that the answer is having a centralized, better organized system that can run in the correct way? Is that basically it?
Yeah, so this is where I would want to kind of revert back to these 6 triggers and just explain my vision from the consolidation point of view. So if we're talking about the lack of control, think about the veterinarian who sells the hospital to consolidator. That's exactly what happens. And then in your mind, you're selling your business that you've built, you're getting paid and rewarded, and you continue working in this business as an employee. It's awesome. You don't have any more concerns and you continue. Psychologically, what happens is that the person loses all power. And then this was a community vet that had the clients, that was a leader. And then one day he comes, or she, back to the hospital and says, "Hi, team. I love you all. We're a family. I just sold you." And then they don't have control. So what consolidators do a lot of the times, they will say, "We're not going to change anything. There's this agenda right now, at least in North America. We're going to buy you and change nothing." So the vet believes in that, and they comes back, to the team and says, "Look, don't worry. I'm selling the hospital because I'm close to retirement, but they promise they're not going to change anything." Then a year later, they come in and say, "We're going to change PIMS. We're going to change lab equipment. We're going to change medications that you use, and we're going to change your benefits." And then everybody looks up to the vet and says, "Hey, you said nothing will be changed," and he can't do anything, or she can't do anything. So you have complete lack of control. And I think that if you have a consolidation that is walks the walk. So when they say we're not going to change anything, don't change anything, or say you're going to change things, because you can't improve business without changing anything. That's the purpose of consolidation, to improve things and change, but say it. And then the same thing about the incentivization of the person. So don't acquire 100%, maybe, acquire some portion of it. And there are consolidators that do that right now, 30-40% they leave behind. So the person is still empowered, and then also incentivized to continue being a leader. So that's one of those things. Value conflict. Almost none of consolidators are doing the purposeful culture fit assessment. Because when you're buying, think about like Pathway, they bought 250 hospitals in the US within 3 years. And I think they assessed the culture of what was going on there. And it doesn't mean that everybody who you buy has to fit the culture. But if they don't, you need to articulate what your culture is. And it has to be not the writing on the wall, "We have these core values," and Gerardo, you're following traction. There's a methodology behind it. You need to practice what you speak. So if you have those 5-7 core values, you explain them during acquisition to the entire team. And then if some people don't fit with that and they feel internally that they can't work in this organization, that's okay. They can find another place to work, but at least they know that there's misalignment of core values, and explain that if we are misaligned, then you can burn out, and then just articulate and say, "This is one of the triggers. Make sure that these fit with your internal me." So then the third one, insufficient reward. Not that corporates sometimes pay more after the acquisition. They never pay less. But the other thing is that people might have had some promises from a previous owner. And if those were not transitioned into the new ownership, then maybe I worked there for 20 years and I was promised this, whatever that is. But then people don't do their diligence. And then another thing is that right now, when you acquire practice, most of them implement new inventory management system, new marketing, and someone has to do it. So someone like a hospital manager or another nurse or someone gets new extra things to do without necessarily being rewarded for it. So there's your insufficient reward. Work overload comes with it. Unfairness, again, if you were promised something by the previous owner, he sold the practice, I don't care. And then there's unfairness in how their career progressed. And then the feedback and the conflict resolution, just something that needs to be taught. And it's not that hard. You can put it into learning management system and deploy it across 250 hospitals. It's not that hard, but you work against 6 triggers. And I think that's sort of short thesis of what we do. There's way more to it, but I think I truly believe that's the path.
So that sounds like the teachings, or what you're talking about there is kind of angled towards the veterinarian who is going to sell, or the veterinarian who's thinking that's going to start to consolidate and so forth. But how would you change your advice? What would you say to a veterinarian who's about to be sold, like whose practice is about to be sold to a corporate, and they are feeling like, I don't know. I have 2 questions. One is, what would you say to a veterinarian who's about to be sold to a corporate, right? Like they're a worker within the practice. And 2, what would you say to a veterinarian who feels burnout? What should they do?
And they're not the owner.
And they're not the owner.
So
So the important things would be to look at what are the values of organization. Ask for their thesis. What did they show as a presentation? So I constantly now, we work with consolidators and we have private equity reaching out. We have consolidators reaching out. My first question to them, send your investment deck. Your investment deck that you show to your private equity, or your presentation deck that you show to the seller. And then in there, just try to parse it and understand what are the core values. They usually talk about them. Do they practice them? And practice them, again, going back to traction. Okay, your core values, how do you deliver that to the clinic that you're about to acquire? Do you have the cultural meeting? Do you go through these? And, you know, in traction, it's you hire, fire, and review people using those. We do that all the time in every organization I worked in the last, 7 years. So how do you practice them? Ask that. And then what is your purpose? And this is the most common thing right now. So in North America, the shift is happening from arbitrage only towards caring about the vets. But I feel that right now they started talking about caring about the vets. They didn't necessarily start caring about the vets. And the very easy question to ask them. So there's, we start with consolidating and they go, we're all about people. We're all about helping veterinarians. We're all about, improving their lives.
What are you doing?
How do you measure that?
How do you measure that?
What is your balanced scorecard at the top of the organization that you look at weekly on your level 10 meeting that determines how your people are happy with you?
Sure, I get it. It's just like, what is your NPS for your individual staff members?
Yeah. So you just run NPS quarterly, and then ask your employees how much you would recommend that for your family member to work here. That's one, and two, to bring their pet here. Very simple. And then do you look at that at the top of the organization, not only at your, revenue, EBITDA, and COGS and labor costs, but do you look really at the top? We are from 80s. We stopped looking at finances only in the big corporations. The balanced scorecard consists of money, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and growth opportunities. Veterinary hospitals look at money. So split your vision and then into the balance scorecard, measure it. And then when you go to buy the clinic, say, this is how we are looking after our veterinarians. We measure their success, their burnout. I use the PFI. It's a professional fulfillment index, 16 questions to determine if the person is burned out or not. Run that every 3 months. Just ask them, survey, use SurveyMonkey. That's it.
Love it. What Ivan said was actually key, but the other question would be, you talked about, the 3 questions you asked yourself, would you recommend your family to send their pet to your clinic?
Yep.
The other question was, what was the other question?
Would you recommend your family member to work here? Like your brother, your father?
That's it, actually, and that's true. That's right, yeah. And the one thing I would say about that question is that when I think about some of my family members and friends, I was like, they couldn't handle emergency. I wouldn't recommend the work here, right? But then the question, it's a tricky one, because it's kind of like, have we set the environment up enough that if they loved it so much that anyone who wanted to work it could thrive in it? And that's really super freaking hard, especially in emergency.
Yep.
But I'm just thinking about our listeners who are not business owners, who are not selling businesses, who are vets in practice, who are listening to what you said earlier about what burnout looked like for you, and then going, that's me, I feel like that. Is there any advice for those guys for what they have a bit of a loss of that power? They don't have much control over the situation at all. What's the advice there?
Yeah. I just want to bookmark that. There's a very important thing that I want to add to the associates that work with you.
Okay.
In most M&As, I'm going through M&A course right now. And in most M&As, when the CEO, it's really a decision of the executives, right? But as soon as the decision is made to do an M&A, a lot of the time CEOs would talk to their management team and say, are you guys with me? They're trying to get a buy-in. How do vets announce the sale of the practice? You just say, I just sold it. I just sold you, all of you guys. They never go back to their associates and say, look, I'm planning to sell this practice. The ownership will change. How would you behave in that scenario? Because what if you're selling 4 vet practice, and then as soon as you sell, they flip and 3 of them leave. Everything that you were gonna gain after the sale is not gonna go away. So I think that maybe announcing to everybody it's a big deal, but and you don't do that. I'm going through cases right now, like US Airlines selling to American Airlines, and IBM selling to Lenovo. They don't announce the entire organization, but the management teams are getting the buy-in and they're deciding what's going to happen after. So why don't we do that in veterinary medicine? So I think from the associate point of view, the sellers should circulate that idea, especially if you're incentivized post-acquisition to still generate value for yourself as well as the corporate. Make sure that you have buy-in from people that work for you. Maybe they will just flip and say, I'm leaving. I just wanted to add that.
So this is where you stay on for 2 years to keep on generating revenue. And if you continue to generate this certain amount of profit, then you will get this amount of return or something like that.
Well, that's the seller. So you incentivize the seller to, there's a lot of mechanisms. There could be a earnout. There could be you just keep your percentage. You could roll your equity into the parent organization, but most of the times it's centered around the seller, not the associates. So associates are really hired people. And if Gerardo, if you hired me, I like you, I want to work for you. And then 2 months later, I didn't know that you were planning to sell the practice and you needed a body to fill in the night shift. And I'm like, Gerardo, you're screwing me. You just left and you're going on your yacht, and then I'm going to be working here. And then I have a new boss. When I'm looking for a job, I'm looking for someone that I will work for. And I have interviewed with that person, not someone who you sold me to. That's important. I'm sure that's how you're going to do it. So then back to your question, Hubert. So in terms of the burnout, I mean, I'm truly not, I learned a lot about it. I'm not this psychologist or psychiatrist, to give suggestions. So I don't want to be prescriptive about anything I say. I just think that to me, I had to leave. I had to stop practicing. And it's, you can't, like if you'll say to someone who is working, has 2 kids and wants to work 7 days a week, 24 hours, because he's buying a new house and all this, the last thing that he will or she listen to your recommendation is to stop working. But if someone is on the path, I almost feel like it's irreversible unless you completely disconnect. I was forced medically to do that. And then that was probably the only time in my life that I actually dedicated to my psychological state. Like I had to go through mindfulness practices, spirituality, a lot of things just to discover, like a lot of things that I would never go like, oh, I need to learn how to meditate. I would never think about that stuff, but I was medically forced to do that. And then I don't know what to suggest to the vets that are burning out, but the main thing, I think, again, back to your comment, Gerardo, on ER vets, those who manage ER vets and those that understand the burnout, you just can't allow them to work 7 days a week. Just say you can't. I'm not going to pay you for it, whatever it is, because they will burn out and some of them will commit suicide. We're the only profession that is that close to the drugs that will kill us. You can burn out in any other industry, but in vet is just, we see it every day and it's very close to reach out for that drug.
Yeah, it definitely is. In Australia, there's a shift towards having it locked up, but still vets have access to where it's locked up. But there's a almighty shift towards supporting vets who are going through burnout, who are going through tough times, because we are acutely aware of the risks associated with stress, burnout, and everything that we do in the veterinary profession, right?
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to be locked up in North America too, but usually the key from the safe is on the nail next to the safe. So, because you need it, every other appointment. So,
who are the people the most affected by it? Veterinarians, and who have access to the safe? The veterinarians. It's really kind of hard to fucking stop it. So,
exactly. Yeah. So it's really not. It's. I saw this bridge in Toronto and they have this bridge, it's close to downtown, that actually people used to jump off a lot. So they built this whole thing around it, preventing, but it's, let's work on not how to prevent them from jumping off the bridge, but why they do that. That's really the key, I think.
In the 6 triggers, you talked about remuneration, about money a couple of times. Can a decent salary make you more immune, or can it prevent burnout? Or I don't know how to put that. Does it help or not really?
No, it's like you're someone who is burning out from work overload, disconnected core values, lack of control and everything else. Let's start paying them more. The payment. So this is actually my new thing that I'm applying within our organization. and it's pretty deep. If you guys want to record but it's actually interesting. I think that money is driving only first two levels of the Maslow's pyramid and hierarchy.
Yeah.
So you go basic needs, safety, then sense of belonging. Then you go to the next one where you the esteem and accomplishment, and then creativity, right? So that's the hierarchy. So I believe, especially with the new generations, Gen Z and Gen Y, the millennials, is that the first two is of course, and that's the money. So of course you need to be paid. Of course you need to have decent pay. And of course you don't want to compare yourself to someone else in a different clinic. So basically, I think that money question is of course, and that's how we do it in ours. So I read an awesome book, if anything I could recommend here is Rules of No Rules. It's about the Netflix culture. And they have this culture where they don't do reviews and raises. Basically, if you're recruited, if someone calls you and says, hey, do you want to come work for us? Then they directly come to their boss and say, I was just pinged, from another hospital. They offer me that much more money. They just match it. Just go, okay, we'll just match it. No questions asked. They actually encourage their staff to work to people, to talk to recruiters, so they match the pay. So we're doing the same in our company. If they find a job somewhere else, we just go, here, that's your pay. So that eliminates actually quarterly necessity or annual necessity to increase the pay, because if now you're at top, even though you're working 20 years here, we can't continue raising your pay because the market cap is there. So that's what we do. So that's the first two levels. So your basic needs and safety. Then when you want to build the sense of belonging and love is, only some people at work create that relationship. But the belonging is that the organization, that you create the core values, and then that's how you build that community. So I think that the third level of Maslow's hierarchy is really that sense of belonging. You create the community, team, family feeling, whatever it is, you can create that at work. And then specifically for Gerardo, because he's a Gen Y and millennial, the rapid goal achievement is one of the characteristics of our generation. Narcissistic, entitlement, and the rapid goal achievement. Those are the three for millennials. So the quarterly goals, and I don't know, in vet hospitals, it's hard to set quarterly goals other than money, but you need to be creative, learn a new skill, do something different, take this course. That next step of the Maslow's hierarchy is accomplishment and esteem could be achieved through quarterly goal setting. They don't have to be remunerated. Money is, of course, belonging, then goal setting. And if you rapidly achieve those goals and you're appreciated for that and you're recognized for that, then you become creative and happy at work at the top of the pyramid. And that's how I actually run the organization which we're in right now.
You said so many things that made incredible sense then, and highlighted to me, because we write with Simon Sinek's book about why, and then you got to take money off the table and all that kind of stuff, right? If my CEO came to me and said, I'm going to give you more money to do this, I would be like, I'd feel stressed, and I would feel like as if I wouldn't be able to perform and I wouldn't be able to complete upon that. I've evolved my own position and my own role within the company to demonstrate value. But every time I do that, I do know that I then release some kind of responsibility around that. So for him to go, hey, here's 50% extra to be able to take this on extra, I'd be like, no.
I think where we get stuck, and I'll just say it and leave it at that, is that second level of the triangle, that comparison thing, where a lot of vets feel like they feel undervalued compared to other professionals. To go, well, I'm getting, $50,000, $80,000 less than my friend who studied for 3 years less, and and I know that because, again, that's out on the socials. I see conversations about it all the time. People feel undervalued, and it's not about the money, but the money gives you that feeling that I'm not actually valued as a professional.
Okay. This is my take as a business owner. As a veterinarian, your role has 3 or 4 functions. 1 is to serve the pet. 2 is to serve the business. 3 is to serve yourself. And then the 4th is to serve your team. And you just have to understand that it's you. If you're in there in the consultation room, when you speak, when you deliver, when you talk about estimates, when you talk about money, it's not just about you. It's about everyone else in the whole entire team. And when you understand that and you value yourself, so what they're doing is they can potentially comparing themselves to people of other professions and all the stuff, but they still haven't shifted their perspective of value of themselves and gotten over how they perceive money and the value that they bring and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard it so many times, and I've listened to so many consults, and especially in this world where locums are paid so much more than the veterinarians who are there and offering value. When it comes down to the locums, you're sure you might have the power, but you have to still demonstrate the value to the business. You still have to demonstrate value to the team. You still have to demonstrate value to the pets and to the owners. So as a veterinarian, my claim would be, or my hope would be, that you look at it from the perspective is, how can I improve myself so that I am improving everything else, not just myself, or advocating for just myself.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, but I don't know if, Hubert, you meant the comparison to the locums or more.
No,
to other professions.
Other professions,
right?
Yeah. So you have that, not the locum vet. You have your hardworking employed vet who looks at his sister's salary and she's.
But I think I don't know if I ever felt underpaid because I'm not a human doctor. I don't know if I actually compared myself to that. To me, it's a different profession. So, I may be paid less than CEO of, I don't know, Microsoft, but I'm not doing that. So I think it's within this practice that we really embrace from Rules of No Rules at Netflix. It's really, when you compare yourself to somewhere else, just make sure that the organization matches that. And then that's really the rule. And it's been actually a really great experience, because when we read it and we were like, oh, we negotiated salary with someone cheaper than in another place. Well, that will go only for so long before they find out how much they could be paid there. So why don't you match that? And then these people will not think about the money. It will be just not a question that they need to worry about. And then they will perform at maximum, because they know that now they're paid maximum for what they do. And then the goal setting should be matching the rapid sort of, because I think that the veterinary, it becomes routine. It becomes sort of an everyday thing. And I went to emergency for novelty, but then after, 5 years, well, you've had all the spleens out that you wanted to, you had all the, hit by cars, and you saved enough koalas if you're in Australia. But, it's, there's never enough of that. I'm just saying that I really like, I don't know if we can do that, because, if we can match, but I think in an ER, and I think it's something to look at. I definitely do that in my organization, because we had a person leave, and then because we were like, okay, well, he's underpaid, under market. Let's set the goal for the guy to reach the market. And the guy left before he reached that, although he loved the organization and everything, because he was focused on completely different thing. He was not focused on the money. So to me, match the pay of what you're qualified for is, of course, don't be happy that you negotiated with the vet or whichever organization you're in to pay them less than someone would pay in another organization, because that will last only so long. And back to the question, can you motivate by paying more? Yes, for like a month, because your lifestyle matches what you make, and then at that point, and actually through my burnout experience, I went into a deep hole financially. And then you just match your level where you at. I was successful as the ER vet and the locum, and then I dropped significantly. I went almost bankrupt. And basically that's the lifestyle that I had to match. So it goes both ways, down or up. You go up to your new salary, and it's the usual thing. You now have this type of car. Now you go to these vacations, and it's norm. So you can continuously accelerate that and try to use that as a motivator. It has to be more than that. It has to be, back to Simon Sinek, and why? Starts with why.
Something I heard recently from a good mate of mine. He said something the other day that really resonated with me. I just want to share this because it made me really think about myself. And it was like, are you a veterinarian of 10 years experience, but doing the same 10 years every year, every after year? Or are you a 10-year experienced veterinarian where every year you built upon your experience? And someone will value a veterinarian who built upon their experience year after year after year, as opposed to someone who felt like as if just because I've been a veterinarian for 10 years and I've done the same stuff every year after year and I can't do anything more, right? There's a completely different value there. And I don't know where that fits in with this conversation, but it's something that resonated with me and made me reevaluate my value and my worth. And what am I worth as a dollar per hour? What am I worth as a locum? What am I worth as this? What can I bring to the practice? If I can still do the same, am I doing more than I could do as a graduate 2-3 years out? If I can't, then maybe I'm not worth the 10 years that I think I'm worth.
Yeah. No, I think it fits with so one of the findings of my research was that the younger vets are more burned out than the older ones. So 30 and under were more burned out than baby boomers and such. And I think that what you just said really fits the generational qualities that we have now. I can't do one thing for 10 years. I mean, or 10 is probably the cap. I can't go back to do vet, maybe because I burned out a couple of times doing it, but I used my vet thing to build a IT company. I used my IT company to switch into business. I switched that to building something else, because this rapid goal achievement, that's what it is. But set the new goal. Set the new goal and always look forward when you're close to this goal, because 10 years after, when we go to vet school, it's hard. Vet school is one of the hardest, I heard, between the human medicine, law school, and then the amount of grit that we use to push through vet school. Then you start working, it's a day-to-day thing. And then if you're not challenged anymore and you're seeing, okay, in the first 3-5 years, you've seen every case you wanted to see, there's no more, anything you achieved. So set a new goal. It's super important to be setting personal goals, and they can't be monetary. They could be monetary, but associate them with the experience. And that's a separate topic to like personal goal setting and achievement, but it's something also important in the career, not only as a veterinarian, but as anybody else.
Any career, mate. I'm done.
Let's wrap it up. Ivan, that was spectacular. You're talking about so many fantastic things. Where can people go and find out more about what you're doing at the moment?
So specifically on, actually on all of these topics. So both burnout and the consolidated methodology, go to vetintegrations.com and then browse through. We have blog posts, we have a new podcast there, and we have the whole study actually also published there with there's a tool where you can flex the metrics and look up things through the survey that we've done. So you can actually play with it and kind of slice the data the way you want. So that would be the best thing, but you can also reach me if you can spell my last name and find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's definitely not Zak.
And go listen to the podcasts. There's two. There's Consolidate That, and I've drawn a blank on the name of the other one, which I actually really enjoy.
A Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. I know you've got the world to go and conquer, but I appreciate you spending the time with us. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you again, Gerardo.
Thanks. Right, he didn't say Hubert, mate. He meant it, right? Okay.
You know those conversations that you have at conferences, back in the days when we still had big vet conferences, when people are chatting to the lecturers and asking questions, and you hear things like, this isn't really in the books, but here's what I think. It's in those kinds of conversations that the best nuggets of wisdom appear, the nitty-gritty real-life details that you can only get from years and years of experience. And it's exactly those kinds of conversations that we try to emulate on the VetVault Clinical Podcasts. We don't want lectures. We want to hear about the challenges, the tips, the stuff-ups, this is how I do it. Go to vvn.supercast.tech to join in the conversation.